Welcome to my channel. I hope you like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to knit this reversible hat for men and women. It's for a head circumference between 22 and up to 23 inches, but you can also make it smaller for a head circumference between 20 and up to 24 inches. In the information box, I'll go ahead and leave you some information on how you can make it smaller or bigger, so be sure to check that out. And as always, if you prefer in pattern, check out my Etsy shop. I'll leave the link to my Etsy shop in the information box below. Thank you so much for your support. Now, to knit this hat for adult men and women with a head circumference between 22 and 23 inches, you're going to need about 82 grams of sports weight yarn. I actually used 2 strands of fingering weight, which is equivalent to sports weight yarn. If you need an approximate gauge, I'll go ahead and leave that in the information box as well. Now, let's get started, and thank you so much for watching. Okay, to knit this hat, these are the needles that I'm going to use. These are 3mm knitting needles. These are 16-inch long. You can also use longer needles with longer cables and just knit the hat in the round using the magic loop technique. Now, this is the yarn that I'm going to be using. This is a very dark gray, so I did a small sample here. This has been washed in 2 inches using 2 strands of this fingering weight yarn. I have 20 rows and 12 stitches in 5 centimeters or 2 inches. Like I said, this is 100% merino fingering weight. I'm using 2 strands. To begin here, we're going to knit this hat in the round. This is going to be a reversible or lined hat. That means we're going to knit the hat twice. So we need to do a provisional cast on, and to do that I have a chain here that I did using a crochet hook. Now I'm going to cast on a total of 128 stitches. I added extra stitches here to my chain, and I used a 3.5mm hook. You can also use a 3mm hook. So here at the end I cut my yarn, so just pass your yarn through this last loop. Don't pull it too much, because once the hat is done, we're going to come back and undo this and then just remove these chains so that we can knit the hat on the other side. But I'll show you that if it's a little confusing right now. So to start here, we're going to go into the back of the chain. If you notice, there's a little bump on the back of the chains. That's where I'm going to be inserting my needles. So into this next chain there, I'm going to insert my needle there, and I'm going to begin here by just pulling a loop through like this. Make sure that you keep the same tension here for this part. Now into the next chain, same thing, insert the needle through and grab a loop like this. Into the next, grab a loop, into the next, grab a loop, and make sure that you're going through the back of the chain. You can clearly see that bump in the back, and make sure that you keep the same tension as you do this here. Continue like this until you have 128 stitches, and then I'll come back and show you what we need to do next. Okay, I finished casting on my stitches. I have a total of 128. Now to join in the round, all we're going to do is just knit the first stitch and every single stitch from here on. So just knit the first stitch and continue knitting each one of these stitches. I'm going to knit this hat with the stockinette stitch. So every stitch for every row is going to be a knit stitch. Continue like this. I forgot to place a stitch marker here to mark the beginning of the row, but we can see that that's the beginning of the row, so I'll do it once this here is done. So continue for this second row, and then I'll come back and show you what we need to do next. Okay, I finished this first row where I knit all around. I said row 2, but it's actually row 1 because the first thing that we did was cast on, so that doesn't count. So at the end of this row, I have a total of 128 stitches. From here on, this is all we're going to do. We're just going to continue with a stockinette stitch. That means we're going to knit every stitch for every round, and we're going to do this for a total of 81 rows. So go ahead and continue and finish this part where you knit 81 rows in stockinette stitch, and then I'll come back and show you what we need to do next. Okay, I did a total of 81 rows in stockinette stitch. That is where we knit every stitch for every row. I have 81 rows total. So when we do the other hat, we're going to do exactly the same thing, 81 rows. So now I'm going to start the decrease here, and to do the decrease, we need to place some stitch markers. So for me, this is the beginning of the row. What I did here is, here's the last stitch that I did, and then I have a stitch marker. So from this stitch marker up to here, the next stitch marker, I have 31 stitches. Then I have one stitch and then a stitch marker. From this stitch marker to the next, again, I have 31 stitches, and then I have one stitch and then one stitch marker. From this stitch marker up to this one here, I have 31, then I have one stitch in between the stitch markers, and then from this stitch marker up to this one here, I have 31 stitches. So each section has 31, and in between the stitch markers, there's one stitch. So what I did is we have 128 stitches minus 4, which are the 4 stitches that are in between the stitch markers. That gives me 124. And then I divided 124 by 4, so that gives me 31. So I have 31 for each one of the sections. There's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here at the end, I have the 31, then I stitch marker, and then the stitch. So this stitch marker here is going to be marking the beginning of the row. So I'm going to put it here on this side. So to begin our decrease, I have 31 stitches here. I'm going to knit 2 together here at the beginning. This is the beginning of the decreasing part of the hat, and we're going to be decreasing every other row. So this is row 1. Now I knit 2 together, so now I'm going to knit up to the 2 stitches before the first stitch marker. So I have 1 stitch here because this is the decrease stitch. Then I have 2. $28. Now I have the 2 stitches before the stitch marker. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make an SSK. We want a left leaning decrease, so I'm going to slip purlwise 1 stitch, slip purlwise, and then the next stitch, and I'm going to bring these stitches back to the left needle, and I'm going to place them like this from back to front, and that's going to change the direction of the stitch. So now I am going to knit 2 together through the back. This is an SSK decrease. Now pass the stitch marker, and the stitch that's between the stitch markers, we always knit. Pass the stitch marker, and now I'm going to make a knit 2 together. So knit 2 together the next 2 stitches. Now I'm going to knit up to the last 2 stitches before the next set of stitch markers. So again, let me show you. Including this one that I have on the needles, I have 1, 2, 27, 28. I have the last 2 stitches before the next set of stitch markers, this one here. So here I'm going to again make an SSK decrease. So slip purlwise, slip purlwise these 2 stitches, and then bring them back to the left needle from back to front. And this is going to change the direction so that I can now knit 2 together through the back. That's an SSK decrease again, which leans to the left. Now pass the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, pass the stitch marker, and knit two together after the stitch marker. There. Now you're going to continue and do the same thing. You're going to knit up to these 2 stitches, then you're going to make an SSK, pass the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, pass the stitch marker, and then knit 2 together. And that's how you're going to continue and finish this first row of decrease. I'm here at the end of this first row of decrease. Now I have the last 2 stitches before the last set of stitch markers. This is the beginning of the row. So here at the end, what I'm going to do is an SSK. So slip, slip, and then return from the back to the front, and then knit 2 together. That's an SSK. Now slip the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, and then slip the stitch marker. This here completes the first row of decreases. At the end of this row, I have a total of 120 stitches. Now for the second row, in this row, all I'm going to do is just knit all around. Like this. So just knit all around all of your stitches. At the end of this second row, you're going to have 120 stitches at the end of this second row. Continue, finish this row, and then I'll come back and show you once again how to begin each decreasing row, and then you're going to continue on your own until we have only a couple stitches left to close the top of the hat. I'm here at the end of this second row. In this row, I knit all around. Now for row 3, I'm going to show you again how to decrease. We're going to be decreasing every other row or odd number of rows. So here, I'm going to begin with knit 2 together because this second stitch marker here is the beginning of the row. So knit 2 together here at the beginning of the third row. Now I'm going to knit up to the last 2 stitches before the next stitch marker. So here I have 1 stitch where I knit 2 together. So that's 1, 2, 26. Now I have the next 2 stitches before the next stitch marker. Here I'm going to make an SSK. So slip, slip, purlwise, return your stitches from the back to the front and knit 2 together through the back. There. Now slip the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, slip the stitch marker, and here we're going to knit 2 together. From here on, that's what you're going to do whenever you come to each one of these stitch markers. So let me show you again. So here I'm going to knit up to the last 2 stitches before the stitch marker. So knit 1, including the one I had on my needles. That's 2, 3, 26. I have the next 2 stitches, so here I'm going to make an SSK. So slip, purlwise, slip, purlwise, these 2 stitches, return the stitches back to the left needle from back to front, and knit 2 together through the back. Slip the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, slip the stitch marker, and here knit 2 together. And that's it. That's how you're going to decrease at the beginning before the stitch marker, then knit the center stitch, and then knit 2 together after the stitch markers. So continue, finish this row. At the end of this third row, you're going to have 112 stitches. We're going to decrease 8 stitches whenever we do this row. And then for row 4, you're going to just knit all around. So even number of rows, you're just going to knit. Odd number of rows, you decrease. Now, I'm not sure how many rows I'm going to do here of decreases, but continue watching. I will let you know exactly how many rows I'm going to do. And all I'm going to do is just repeat these 2 rows. One row you knit all around, and then the next row you decrease. Continue like this. Let's continue and decrease and shape the top of the hat, and continue watching. I will let you know exactly how many rows I'm going to do here. Eventually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to maybe longer knitting needles, and then just continue using the magic loop technique, because these needles here have a shorter cable, and it tends to get harder once you start to decrease and you only have a couple stitches. So that's what I'm going to do. You can also use double pointed needles. Whatever it's easier for you, you can go ahead and use. Okay, I'm almost done with the decreasing part here of the hat. I have 16 stitches left. In between the stitch markers, I have 3 stitches. So 3, 6, 9, 12 plus 4, that's 16 stitches left at the end of row 28. Row 28 was a knit row where I just knit in the round. Now, since we only have a couple of stitches left, I'm going to show you how I'm going to do these last couple of rows. So make sure that you have a total of 16 stitches left. So here to do row 29, this is how we're going to work this row. Here I'm using the magic loop technique to knit this bit of the hat in the round because I only have a couple of stitches left. So the needles are the same size though. So here to begin, I'm going to knit 1. And then the next 2 stitches, I'm going to make an SSK. So slip, slip, purlwise, return your stitches from the back to the front onto the left needle, and then knit through the back like this. Knit 2 together through the back. Now remove the stitch markers as we go. Knit the center stitch, remove the next stitch marker, knit 1 stitch, and then SSK. So slip, slip, purlwise, return the stitches from the back to the front onto the left needle, and knit 2 together through the back. Remove that stitch marker, knit the center stitch, drop that needle and remove that stitch marker, turn, push your cable, pull the needle from the back, and knit 1, SSK, slip, purlwise, slip the second stitch purlwise, insert the needle from the back to change the direction, and knit 2 together. Remove that stitch marker, knit the center stitch, remove that stitch marker, and knit 1, and then SSK, slip, slip, return your stitches, knit 2 together, and remove this stitch marker, knit 1. And here is row 29. At the end of this row, you should have, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 stitches left at the end of this row. Now, I'm not going to make any more decreases. I'm going to close the top of the hat with these 12 stitches. So now we're going to cut our yarn, leave a nice tail here. So now with this yarn needle, remove these stitches so that we can close the top of the hat. Here's the last stitch. Pull the yarn through. Now you're going to pass the needle through like this from the top to bottom like this, and this is going to create a knot here. And all you have to do here is just pull the yarn and the top of the hat is going to close. Now I'm going to weave some more this leftover yarn all around. Now insert this through the inside. And all you have to do now is just hide your ends. Weave this around a couple of times to reinforce the yarn. I think that looks pretty good. Here's the top of the hat. I think I'll leave it like that. That's how it looks from the top. So this part of the hat is done. So now we're going to do the same thing here for the other hat. Okay, so we finished the first hat and now we're going to remove this provisional cast on. Here is the end of the chain that I did, and here's the beginning. You can clearly see that this is where we started. There's the slip knot, and this is the other end. This is where I finished the chain. So I'm going to start on this side. So I'm going to grab my needles. I have my short cables on now, and we're going to start right here. Here I had made a knot to keep the stitches together, so I just went ahead and undid that knot. So now we're going to go from top to bottom like this and pick up that first stitch. And as we go, we can pull this provisional cast on and the stitch is going to come loose like this. There's the first stitch. Make sure that you are going through both strands and then find the next one. I like to pull the stitch off and then insert the needle from the top down like this. Here are the two stitches, and undo the next stitch and insert the needle through that stitch, and this is how you're going to continue stitch by stitch. Pull this provisional yarn there and insert the needle from the top down, because this is the right side. Pull that yarn, that releases the stitch, and immediately insert the needle from the top down. I'm going to do this until I have all of my stitches on my needles. Again, I'm going to have 128 of these stitches on my knitting needles, and then we're going to get started on the second hat. This is a reversible hat. That's why we did this provisional cast on when we started. So continue and remove all of your stitches and put them onto the needles, and then I'll come back and show you how we're going to continue for the second hat. Okay, I removed my provisional cast on. I have all of my stitches back on the needles. I have 128 stitches. Now we're going to do the same thing we did here with this first hat. We're going to now continue. I'm going to use a different yarn color here, but it's the same thing, 2 strands of fingering weight yarn. That's what I'm using here. I think the equivalent to this would be sports weight. Make sure to put a stitch marker here to mark the beginning of the row, and all we're going to do here is just knit 2 stitches using both yarn colors. Here's the tail end of the gray yarn, and here's the new yarn color. So I'm just going to knit 2 stitches using these 2 strands. So knit 2 stitches. You can also just attach the yarn here to the side and just start knitting with the new yarn. I like to do it this way. That's 2. I'm actually going to do 3. And now I'm going to drop the gray yarn here and just continue now with the new yarn color. Like this. You can join the second color any other way that you like. I like to do it like this. So now all I'm going to do here is just knit in the round with the new color, and I'm going to make a total of 81 rows, which is what we did here for the body of this hat, and then we started the decrease. So all we're doing here is just knitting in the round over and over with the stockinette stitch for a total of 81 rows. Make sure you place a stitch marker to mark the beginning of the row. That way, when we start the decreases here, it's exactly the same. I'll come back and show you how to start on the decreasing part, and then we'll finish the hat. Okay, I finished making these 81 rows for the second hat. Now we need to place some stitch markers so that we can start the decreasing part. It's going to be done exactly in the same way how I showed you here. I'm just going to show you the first and the second row, and then from there on you're going to do exactly the same thing. It's going to be done exactly in the same way how I showed you here, so you can just rewind the tutorial and just go back to that section where I showed you the decreasing part. So here, to begin and decrease for the second hat, this is what we're going to do. We need to place some stitch markers. So here's the beginning of the row stitch marker. Notice that it's in green. The rest of my stitch markers are in a different color. That way I will always know where the beginning of the row is. So from here, from this first stitch marker up to here, the next stitch marker, I have 31 stitches, and then I have one stitch and then a stitch marker. From this stitch marker up to the next stitch marker, I have 31 stitches, and then I have one stitch and then the next stitch marker. From this stitch marker up to the next one, I have 31, and then I have one stitch and then a stitch marker. So from this stitch marker to the last stitch marker, I have 31. So each section has 31 stitches, and in between the stitch markers I have one stitch. So here, to begin, I'm going to place my beginning of the row stitch marker here. So to begin this first row of decrease, this is how we start to decrease. So you're going to start with knit 2 together, and then knit up to the last 2 stitches before the stitch marker. So we're going to knit 1, (27 stitches, including the knit 2 together that I did. I have 28 stitches, but I just counted the actual stitches that we knit. We have the first set of stitch markers. We're going to make an SSK here to make a left leaning decrease. So to do this, there's 2 ways to do the SSK. So let me show you the first one, how I do it. I slip purlwise and slip purlwise these 2 stitches, and then from the back to the front I change the direction. So with the left needle, put them from back to front like this, and then knit 2 together like this. Or you can do it this other way. I'm going to put them back, but I'm going to put them how they originally were. So like this. You can slip like this, knitwise, slip knitwise, and then put them back on the left needle like this, and then just knit 2 together. Either way, you're going to get the same result, the SSK. Now, slip the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, slip the stitch marker, and here you're going to knit 2 together. And then again, you're going to knit the stitches up to the last 2 before the stitch marker. So let me show you again. That's 1, 2, I've knit 27 stitches, including the knit 2 together that we did at the beginning. I have 28 stitches here. Now, here we're going to make an SSK. So I already showed you how I do it. I showed you 2 ways, so I'm just going to continue how I do mine. I slip purlwise these 2 stitches, and then from back to front, put them back on the left needle, and then knit 2 together. Pass the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, drop that needle. I'm using the magic loop technique here. Turn your work. Here's that second stitch marker, and now we can knit. You can either knit like this, or you can pull the needle and knit these stitches here. Either way, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to knit 2 together, and then knit up to the next stitch marker. So that's 1, 2, .27. I have the last 2 stitches before the stitch marker, so here you make an SSK. So slip purlwise these 2 stitches, and from back to front, put them back on the left needle, and then knit 2 together through the back. And now slip the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, slip the second stitch marker, and here we're going to knit 2 together through the front. And now knit up to the last 2 stitches again. That's 1, 2, .27. Here's the last 2 stitches. Make an SSK. So slip purlwise the 2 stitches, put them back on the left needle from back to front, and knit 2 together through the back. This is the SSK. Slip, slip, knit 2. Pass the stitch marker, knit the center stitch, and this completes the first row of decreases. At the end of this first row, you should have a total of 120 stitches. We have decreased 8 total stitches at the end of this row, and from here on, you're always going to be decreasing 8 stitches whenever you do the decreasing row. For the second row, all you do is just knit each stitch all around, and you're also going to have 120 stitches, and that's how you're going to continue just repeating these 2 rows. Remember that the decreasing rows are odd numbers of rows, and then the other rows, the even numbers, are where you knit all around. And that's all you're going to do. Just repeat these 2 rows. It's exactly how I showed you for the first hat until we have about 12 stitches left so that we can close the top of the hat. I'm going to go ahead and do that, finish this part. In total, we did, let's see, 29 rows. So 29 rows was, that'll give you 12 stitches here, and then we close the top of the hat. So I'm going to do the same thing. Remember, you can always just rewind the tutorial to this section where I showed you with this hat. It's going to be done exactly in the same way. So continue. Let's finish the second hat, and then I'll come back and show you the finished hat. Okay, I finished making my decreases. I'm here at the end of row 28. I have done a total of 28 rows here for the decreasing part. At the end of row 28, I have a total of 16 stitches. So 4, 4, 4 plus 4, that's 16 stitches. Row 28 was a knit row. That's where I knit all around. So now for row 29, this is how we're going to work the last row. I'm going to knit 1 stitch here. I have 3 stitches here, so I'm going to knit 1, and then I'm going to make an SSK. So slip, this is how I do it. You can do it both ways, how I showed you here at the beginning. Slip, slip, purlwise, return the stitches from back to front, and knit 2 together. That's an SSK. Remove the stitch markers, knit the center stitch, remove the stitch marker, knit 1, SSK. So slip, slip, purlwise, return the stitches from back to front onto the left needle, and knit 2 together through the back. Remove the stitch marker, knit 1. Here I have 2, 4, 6 stitches. I'm going to turn, remove the stitch marker here, pull the needle from the back, and knit 1, SSK, slip, slip, return from back to front, and knit 2 together through the back. Remove the stitch marker, knit 1, remove the stitch marker, knit 1, now SSK, so slip, purlwise, return the stitches from back to front onto the left needle, and knit 2 together through the back. Remove that stitch marker and knit the last stitch. And here is the last row. I have 12 stitches left. Now I'm going to cut my yarn and just remove all of these stitches. This is exactly how I did the first hat, so make sure that you do the same thing. I have 12 stitches left at the end of row 29. Here I'm going to cut my yarn, leave a little tail there so that we can weave the yarn all around. And with the yarn needle here, we're going to remove all of these stitches. Okay, so here's the last stitch. We're going to go here to the beginning and remove the first stitch, and then do the same thing for each one of the stitches. Pull the yarn, make sure you leave a loop here, and remove these stitches on this other side. Now we have this loop. Just insert your needle through that loop, and that creates a knot there, so that when you pull the yarn, this knot here secures your stitches. Now carefully pull your yarn, don't pull too hard, and now we're going to weave this yarn all around one more time just to reinforce these last stitches here. So you just go all around. Go around a couple of times. This is how we're going to reinforce and close the top of the hat, since we can't go through the inside and hide our ends. There, I think that's fine. I'm going to do it one more time, just so that I come out right here, right in the center. And then once here, I'm going to go through the little hole here at the top, and then go through like this, And that's going to create a knot. And then just go back through again and just come out on this other side. This is where we decreased, right through the center, right there. And the top of the hat is closed. You can cut your yarn there, and the second hat is all done. So now all you have to do is just turn one hat inside. It's reversible. This is a reversible double-sided knit hat. I'm going to go ahead and block my hat, and then I'll come back and show you. I used 100% merino wool, so the yarn should bloom. So I'll come back and show you how it looks, and I will also give you more information on how you can make the hat in various sizes. So continue watching. Okay, I finished the hat. This is how it looks. I went ahead and blocked it. Here's the top, here's the bottom. Now let's turn it over. Here's the other side. And that's how it looks. And you just fold it and you have a nice brim. It's reversible and it's 2-layered. And this is how it looks on the other side. I kind of like this color here. Now my husband tried it on, and it fits perfect on him. He's got a head circumference of about 22 3/4 of an inch. So I would say that this hat is for adults with head circumferences between 22 and 23 inches. I have a head circumference of about 22.5, and it fits perfect on me as well. So there you have it. You can also make it smaller, from a child to a teen size and up to an adult extra large size. In the information box below, I'll go ahead and leave you some information on how you can make it. I'll leave the number of rows and the number of stitches that you need to cast on for the different sizes, so make sure to look there. It's just a matter of casting on a different number of stitches here and then continuing and make more rows. The decreasing part is going to be the same because the stitch multiple I'll go ahead and keep the same, which is multiples of 4, and you're going to do the same thing as far as the decreases. The only difference would be, again, the number of stitches that you're going to cast on. Remember that we did a provisional cast on here, so you would do the same thing for your hat, whatever size that you want to make. So I'll go ahead and leave that information in the information box, along with the my Etsy shop if you prefer written pattern. Okay, so this was today's tutorial. I hope you like it. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.